Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Points Office Hours Live. I'm Paige. I am here with you every Thursday and at 4:30, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to talk about everything family engagement, everything Talking Points. So we're here. It's been a couple weeks, so I'm excited to be back with you. And today we are going to talk about understandability. That might be, I'm not even sure it is a word, but we use it all the time because we want to connect families and schools, and making sure that families and teachers can understand each other is kind of our whole mission. Making sure they're connected, but making sure that the messages that go through between them is in an understandable way, overcoming every barrier that we know to exist between those two parties is really what we're all about. So we're going to talk about understandability and everything that falls underneath that. I know we talked about translation a couple of sessions ago, and that does fall under understandability, but it's not the only. So we are here, Office Hours Live, for Talking Points, and we're going to talk about what that means and how we help you do that. So strap in and we're going to get started. So basically, first question on your mind probably is, what does that word even mean? You keep saying understandability. What is that? So I'm going to back up a couple of steps and explain a couple of things to you from the Talking Points point of view. So Talking Points works to support families and to support teachers in their best practices for family engagement. So, and what we focus on is not just family engagement, but universal family engagement. And what that means is that we work to help teachers involve and engage all families equitably. So we're not just making sure teachers can send out an announcement to everybody. That announcement needs to be in everybody's language, everybody's preferred language. That announcement needs to be able to be replied to so that families can interact with educators. So two-way communication is super duper crucial because families don't just need to know what's going on, they need to be able to ask questions. So initiating conversations on the family side is very important for effective family engagement. And so universal family engagement really means that considering everyone when crafting a message and when sending out announcements, whether it's a DM or an announcement, and considering that understandability, which I'm about to define for you, is what we're about. So understandability, which you're still like, okay, define it. Understandability includes more than just translation, which I know you're aware that we do. So it includes translating the message for anyone and everyone. So whether your families all speak English and you don't have to worry about translation at all, or they speak one of the 150 plus languages that we currently support, translation is one. The quality of that translation. So if you look back a couple of episodes or sessions ago, you'll see in depth what our translation system is and why that quality is so high to make sure that families are getting accurate conversations with teachers and vice versa. So translation quality, literacy level. So when we talk about understandability, we talk about literacy level, and that could include the difficulty of the message to read, whether or not there are audio options. And these are all things I'm going to break down today. I'm just kind of defining what understandability includes. And then it could include terminology that's used in a message. So think about those education words that we all throw out there, not thinking, oh, everyone in the room didn't study education, doesn't use all of these acronyms every single day. And then tone. Tone is another thing that really goes into understandability, because just think about a text message you send a friend and how they could read that 7 different ways and feel. They could think you're making a joke. They could think you're super angry with them. They could think, so making sure that your tone comes across a certain way because it is a written message. Tone is part of understandability, because understanding the meaning of something, not just the words themselves, is also part of understandability. So there are a few different elements to what we're talking about today. And it's important to understand when you're trying to engage all of the families in your classroom and you don't know them yet, or you're getting to know them and you want to partner with them meaningfully. So let's jump in to the first part. We won't spend a ton of time on it today because we have talked about translation in the past, and you can find out a lot about it on our website, and you can go back and watch that other session. So I'm going to actually link that session, that YouTube video, in the comments. It's all about our translation system, because language is kind of the first barrier you need to get over, because they're not going to understand anything you're saying if you're not speaking their language. So the first part of understandability is making sure that every family is receiving the messages or announcements that you're sending in their preferred home language. So if it's everybody speaks English, then boom, you got it. You don't have to do any translation. But if you've got a family speaking Vietnamese, one family speaking Spanish, you've got 3 speaking English and 4 speaking Urdu, like we support 150 languages, it's very likely that we can cover all of your families. You can send one announcement and it will go to all of them in those languages. They can respond to you in their home language and you'll get it in English. It really simplifies the process for educators to be able to connect in those home languages. And it really makes families, what we hear from families and from teachers who have used Talking Points is that language piece is huge. It makes families feel seen. It makes them feel valued, because a lot of them have never been approached or talked to in their home language in an educational institution. And it really makes them feel like you're taking that extra step, even though it's so simple through the app, because we're doing the translation. All you do is set up their language at the very beginning. So you're not doing any extra work, but they feel like it's a huge step towards trusting the school, trusting you with their child, with their child's education, and being able to build a relationship with you. And they can understand what you're saying. So the first part of understandability that Talking Points helps you out with is language. I think that one's kind of a gimme. So we're going to skip to the next one, which is one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about a lot when we come to adults, especially teachers, because we're focused on the kids. We're focused on teaching these kids how to read, teaching these kids how to write. So a lot of times we don't think about the literacy level of their grown-ups. So we just think, oh, I've got to tell the moms this, I've got to tell the dads this. When her aunt comes to pick her up, I've got to send her a message that says this. Now, one thing that it is really important to remember is that just because someone is an adult does not mean that they are literate, fully literate in English or their preferred language, their home language, their first language. So it's just something to keep in mind. Everyone, just like our students, have varied literacy levels. And there isn't really a way for us to know. We can't just ask. There isn't a way for us to know what everyone's literacy level is. So Talking Points has taken that into consideration. And when you compose a message on Talking Points on the web app, you will see what we call the readability flag pop up, that if you are typing a message that has a literacy level of 5th grade or above, because that would be difficult to read for folks who dropped out of school early or moved here from another country and haven't either did not have education where they came from or did not learn to read in English, or whatever the case may be. So we are having that flag pop up just as an alert to say, hey, you may want to simplify your text a bit so that anyone reading this, of all the contacts you're reaching, will be able to understand what you're saying. You don't want to put Shakespeare in there. You don't want to type out, something that's super complicated. Simple sentences, making sure we're not using like a ton of contractions. And what we've also done is when that flag pops up, it will link you to this blog post, which I'm just now putting in the comments, that's called Writing for Translation. And what it does is it explains really beyond just writing for translation, writing for understandability, is so that it gives you very specific tips on how to compose a message that will translate well, that will be understood by people on varying levels of the literacy scale. And they're very easy tips. It's not like super difficult stuff. It's like writing simple sentences, not using passive voice, very simple things that once you read it, you'll keep them in mind, and that flag may not pop up for you again. But it's just there as a reminder. And it doesn't make you change the message. It just prompts you to. You can turn it off and ignore it if you know that everybody's going to be able to read it. Totally up to you. These are just best practices that we like to share. So that's another part of understandability that we try to help you with. All right, so I mentioned another part of understandability to keep in mind is if there are speech or audio options for the families, for the contacts, the recipients of your announcements messages. And that goes along with literacy, because consider someone receiving your messages might not be able to read your message in whatever language it comes in, and they may not be able to type or write a message in whatever language they are sending in because of their literacy. So in the family app, we have added speech to text and text to speech options for that exact reason. Obviously, it's also just a helpful tool for anybody who's short on time. Like these are helpful tools regardless. But for the understandability purpose, for the literacy level purpose, these are, accessibility. These are equity features that will help those who just need to understand. And it's also helpful to note that families who aren't using the family app, who are just using regular text message, their phone may also have speech to text and text to speech that they can use, even if they're not using the mobile app. But we did add those to our app specifically for this purpose. So I'm going to link help articles for both of those features, just in case you have family members that would benefit from those two. You could show them how to find that. For speech to text, it's a little microphone. For text to speech, it's a little megaphone so that they can listen to it. So, and that's in the family app again. I'm glad this is helpful, Nicolette. Thank you. All right, the next understandability piece is terminology. And I think this one it hits close to home for me, I know, because when I was teaching, I would come home and try to tell my husband about my day and just use all of these acronyms and like words, and he would be so sweet, he would listen, but I know he didn't understand half of what I was talking about because I was just throwing out all of these terms and things that just made no sense to someone who is not in the education field, who hasn't studied that, and who doesn't hear it every single day. So one of the very important things to keep in mind when you are talking to any family contact about education is to talk about it remembering they don't know those terms or assuming they don't know those terms. That's one of the things that I believe we mentioned in that blog that I put in the comments. But if you do add some of those terms into your message, into your text, we have a feature that will help the family understand what that means, and kind of save the day. So what we have in the family app is called Ed 101, and I actually want to pull it up for you to show you what this one looks like. It's one of my favorite features. And so if they have the family app and you send the word IEP or assessment, anything like that, it will highlight the word because we have trained the app to know, oh, that's a teacher word, or that's one of those pesky acronyms. And so they can tap on that word, and in their language, a definition will pop up at the bottom in 5th grade or lower literacy, because that's our bar, to explain what it is. And what that does is it keeps them from having to be embarrassed, keeps them from having to interrupt the conversation and ask you what you're talking about. So that conversation can just keep flowing, and you don't have to stop to explain. They don't have to be embarrassed to ask, and they can ask you to further clarify, absolutely. But we want to help give them the capacity to understand the U.S. education system further, because that's part of our mission, is to help families be more engaged in their children's education. And we also want to save you time. You just want to talk to them about what's going on right now, and they need to know what you're talking about. So that's one of the coolest features, I think. So terminology is a really important one to keep in mind, for sure. Alrighty. And the last part of understandability, and this is a list that I put together to kind of build out what understandability means. I would love to know if there are other parts that you would consider part of understandability and making messages or communication in general really understandable for families? If you could throw those in the comments, I would love to know what you think. So the last part that I would like to talk about is tone. So this could be an issue communicating with anybody. Like I said earlier, like I'll send a text to a friend and just like not word it right or not put a laughing emoji and they think I'm angry, or just like the tone is missing because I don't realize, oh yeah, when it's text form, you don't really hear them talking. You don't really get the tone. So it's important to really think about, okay, how will this come across in text form? And what we like to recommend, best practice, is always to try to use asset-based, positive language when possible, to stay open. Keep it open. It's really crucial when communicating with parents because it builds and maintains trust. So the partnership can continue throughout the year. And focusing on the student's success, not focusing on the grown-ups' feelings about each other or about anything that's happened prior in the year, but we have the same goal. The goal is for the student to succeed. So we're going to talk about behavior, attendance, grades, and we're going to talk about this student's strengths and how they can grow to get to that goal that we've set together. So keeping it asset-based. And if you're not familiar with that term asset-based, which you might be as an educator, you may not be as a family member or as an educator, I'm not sure. But that just means really talking about strengths and lifting them up. You may be more familiar with a growth mindset, something like that. But really trying to keep things positive. So for example, if you were to craft a message that is about Johnny has missed 3 days of school. He's, bordering on truancy, and we need to talk about this in a meeting, something like that. If I just stated those 3 sentences with nothing else, it might come across very accusatory. It might set off some emotions, and that just may not go very well with the family. And is it false information? No. Is it stuff they need to know? Yes. So that's not a wrong message to send, but if I want this family to still be on my side, working together with me to help this child succeed, I need to let them know that we're on the same team and I want Johnny to be good. So I would write that message more like, hey, I've noticed that Johnny's missed 3 days lately. I'm worried that he's going to hit truancy status. What can we do together to make sure that doesn't happen? Just wording things slightly different in a positive manner really changes the tone and brings in that partnership piece, and it makes a world of difference. So definitely something to keep in mind. I took a lot longer talking about this than usual, but if there are any questions that anybody has, please put them in the chat. I did see some comments, which is fantastic. You can always comment on this even after we're live. You can comment later when you're watching it, and I'm always watching, and I can, or watching our socials. I'm not always watching, that's scary. I'm watching our comments, I can reply, and I can also answer questions next week live. But I would also like to share what our challenge is for this week, since I don't want to run out of time. Simple challenge is to preemptively read the Writing for Translation blog post that I put in the comments, because why wait until your readability flag pops up and tells you that your message is too difficult? Read the post now so that you know what the tips are and you're already a pro at crafting understandable messages. That's what I would do. It's a really, really helpful blog post. Tells you like I think it might be 9 tips. It's very, very digestible. It might even be one that you want to bookmark. If there's a message that you feel is kind of difficult to write because it's I don't know, tricky information, you could pull up that blog post and see, oh yeah, I don't need to include that or whatever. I really challenge you to read this blog post because it's very, very helpful. It is our most read blog post all year, every year. So teachers find it super helpful. That's your challenge this week. Otherwise, the comments are open for questions. I'll stay for a few minutes, but I hope this conversation about understandability has been helpful and that crafting new messages to your families will be a little bit easier and a little bit more positive and open moving forward. So let's see if we get any questions. I see one. So it says, what if something does come through or go through that doesn't make sense? That is a great question. So, pardon me. So obviously, like, nobody's perfect. That's going to happen rarely, but it will happen sometimes, whether it's because of a typo or what have you. So what we've done for that is we have implemented a really cool feature called Help Me Understand. And I'm dropping that in the chat right now, a little explanation of that. It's called Help Me Understand. It's a little question mark next to a chat. If you hover over the text message on web, or if you see it in your app, then a little question mark pops up. It's for you and for families. So if there's one that just doesn't make sense, you can click Help Me Understand, and a human translator will take a look at that conversation and try to make sense of that translation, see if something went wrong because of a typo or whatever, and they'll send it back to you and say, actually, this is what it was supposed to say, and they'll help you out there. So we've covered that for you. Looks like we don't have any other questions coming through, so we might stop just a couple minutes early. But I hope you have a wonderful Friday tomorrow and that you learned a little bit today, and we can all send some great messages. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Connect with us on socials. Here's a QR code for you, and we'll see you later.